Les habla Pocho Salcedo y damos la bienvenida a nuestra audiencia en Sudamérica y a todos aquellos que nos acompañan de costa a costa en los Estados Unidos de Norteamérica, en Hawái y en Puerto Rico. Una vez más, invitándolos desde Nueva York a una caminata que va más allá de los titulares. Bienvenidos al ADN de las noticias. La noticia de la muerte bajo custodia de Mahsa Amini, de 22 años, conocida como Jina Amini, que murió después de ser detenida por la policía de moralidad iraní por el uso inadecuado del hijab, un velo obligatorio para cubrirse la cabeza, ha alimentado la indignación nacional y las protestas que ahora son promovidas principalmente por mujeres. Se extendió por todo el país y atrajo también la atención del mundo. Con nosotros desde Oslo, Noruega, el doctor Mahmood Amiry-Moghaddam, un experto internacional en temas de derechos humanos en Irán. Dr. Moghaddam, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. I say hello to all the viewers of the program and to you.
Mahmood Amiry-Moghaddam is a Norwegian-Iranian neuroscientist and human rights advocate. Amiry-Moghaddam began using his voice to raise awareness of the Iranian authorities' human rights violations in 2004. The same year he received the King's Gold Medal for Best Medical Doctorate at the University of Oslo. In 2008, was awarded the Anders Jahre Awards Medicine Prize for Young Scientists. He is a member of the Norwegian Academy of Science and Letters. In 2013, Amiry-Moghaddam was selected by an independent panel as one of the 10 brightest minds in Norway. Dr. Amiry-Moghaddam's activism has helped to create awareness of several death penalty cases in both the Norwegian and international media. He was particularly involved in stoning and child death penalty cases and contributed greatly to international reactions by bringing the cases to the media's attention.
Well, thank you very much. Let's start by trying to put this situation in Iran in context. Why this new episode that started with the death of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini has provoked a resurgence of protests across Iran, resonating worldwide?
Yes, so the protests that were triggered by the brutal murder of Mahsa Amini, they were just the last drop that led to an overflow, because what we see now is a whole nation, people from all parts of the society, young, old, they are workers, they are students, they are academics, basically in all the provinces, all ethnicities. They say that they have had enough of more than 43 years of oppression. And they don't want the Islamic Republic. So unlike what some media outlets say, it's not about only the compulsory hijab or the dress code. It's about highly incompetent, corrupt, and oppressive regime that is not able to solve people's daily problems. As you know, Iran has huge financial issues. Iranian people are suffering under inflation, poverty. At the same time, Iranian authorities spend billions of dollars on a nuclear program that nobody knows what it is good for. They are spending lots of resources and money on funding the Iranian proxies in other countries like in Yemen, in Iraq, in Lebanon. On the other hand, Iran, during the summer when there is no rain, Iranians are suffering by water crisis. When it rains, they suffer by flooding. So basically, there is an incompetent regime. And in addition, they take away all the fundamental rights of their citizens. Iranian citizens, they don't have basically all their rights. If you look at the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, all of them are violated on a daily basis. freedom of speech, freedom of assembly. People are arrested, they are tortured. There is no freedom of, the minorities are not treated well. Some religious minorities like Baha'is, they don't have right to higher education. And so the list is very long. So what we see now is a population that has stood up against the regime, and they have had enough. And I would say the difference between these protests and the previous ones is the degree of determination and anger. Iran Human Rights, the organization that I lead, have been following the situation in Iran for more than 15 years, and we have had several protests. I've never seen so angry people on the streets, and more importantly, it seems that they don't have the fear anymore. Because as you know, Iranian authorities, like any dictators, they depend on fear in order to keep on the power. And we see now, after 4 weeks, with protests, with more than 200 people being killed among the protesters, thousands been arrested, but the protests still continue. So it seems that the barrier of fear is breaking up.
Well, thank you. Of course, we in the West focus on the role of women and young ladies in the protest, and for a conservative Islamic theocracy, these might be a huge act of rebellion. But have they been participants in the past with the visibility that we observe in the West?
Women in Iran, from the very beginning of the Islamic Republic in 1979, they have been, of course, they were the first victims of that revolution, I would say. They became second-grade citizens after the revolution. So they have always been part of this movement, but the way we see it now, we haven't seen before. When you see young girls, they take off their headscarf and they burn it. It's a demonstration of anger and a message to the authorities that we are not afraid of you anymore. And in this way, we haven't seen it. So that's why I think that whatever happens now, there is no way back to the time before Mahsa's death. So these protests have the potential to go very far and to lead to a big change.
And thank you. The history of Iran, as generally seen from the West, is one where human rights violations is a constant. We can almost go back 70 years ago to 1953, when a coup d'etat strengthened the monarchical rule of the Shah. Is this the correct view of seeing Iran with steady violation of human rights?
Well, Iran is a complex state. I think people who have traveled to Iran would see many aspects. Like, Iran is a beautiful country, a rich culture, very friendly people. Unfortunately, we don't have experience of longer democratic governance, and that's true. But on the other hand, Iran is also a country where at least once for each generation, there have been an attempt to reach a democracy. So our constitution of 1907 was actually much more progressive than the constitution that we are having now. But there are complexities. It's large countries, lots of natural resources like oil, gas, and other resources, and of course there are many ethnicities. It's a ancient culture and history. So it is. I don't know. I mean, we have had lots of human rights violations, maybe in the past and especially now. But on the other hand, it's been said that one of history's first human rights documents was written in Iran by one of the Iranian kings. So it's complex.
I have to agree, and the audience have to agree. This is a complex issue. We just have like a 2,000 meter view above of what it is. So I appreciate you pointing that out. Is the role of the UN effective? How its actions improve the human rights conditions for the average citizen in Iran?
Well, UN doesn't have too many mechanisms to use actually to promote the human rights. So one of the mechanisms is the special rapporteur. So a special rapporteur was appointed in 2011, and they present reports on the human rights violations in Iran twice a year. This increases the cost of human rights violations by the authorities. So in this way, it is it's like a pressure on the authorities. But what we need is a mechanism which can hold the Islamic Republic leaders accountable for the human rights violations, and especially now, when they use live ammunition against protesters. This is an international crime. And so far, the United Nations hasn't been able to establish these mechanisms, but it is possible. I think if the member countries, because UN is basically what UN does is based what the members do. The Security Council obviously cannot do much because of the presence of some of Islamic Republic's allies are there, like Russia. They will never vote for a resolution, a binding resolution against Iran. But the General Assembly of UN can do something. In Syria in 2011, we remember that the Assad regime, with the help of the Islamic Republic of Iran's Revolutionary Guards, they killed thousands of people. It was the beginning of the Arab Spring. And at that time, UN couldn't do anything because of the vetoes in the Security Council. But a few years later, they established an independent investigation mechanisms. And this is something that I hope they do for Iran. We should not wait until the Iranian authorities kill thousands of people before we make an action. And this is possible. So I hope the United States, all countries in Latin America, in Europe, they go together and push for establishment of such a mechanism, because this can be preventive. When Iranian authorities see that what they do will have consequences, it might actually help that at least those on the ground who have been given order to shoot at demonstrators, protesters, they might think twice when there is an international mechanism that will hold them accountable one day.
Well, thank you very much. We'll be right back. This is only the opening salvo. There's so much more that we can cover, and we see you at the other end of the break. We have in this discussion about Iran and human rights. And I have a question for you. Iran is under severe sanctions. However, this is, I'm not sure if this is counterproductive. we all often hear the Iranian government blaming the West and not their own performance for the problems in Iran.
Yes, so the issue of sanctions is also complex and important because, as you say, that Iranian authorities use it for whatever it's worth. They blame basically all the failures they have on the sanctions. However, the sanctions were lifted. We didn't have sanctions before 2017. After the nuclear deal was met. And I think at that time, Iranian people didn't feel much difference. Their situation was not improved. But what we noticed was that the Revolutionary Guards, which is basically, it's the ideological army that keeps Islamic Republic in power and which also interferes in many countries, their budget was increased. And we have seen that families of people who are in charge, children of these ayatollahs, they have become much richer. Many of them live in the United States and Canada and live, a Western lifestyle, while their parents, they are suppressing people. So I would say that blaming everything on sanctions, at least in my view, is not correct. If you see at the corruption that we have in Iran, I mean, when they want to hire someone on a top position, they don't go after the expertise or qualifications. What they go after is whether the person is loyal to the system and the family contacts. And that's, I think, one of the main issues that the Iranian people are facing. It's the corruption, which also brings the incompetence, because these people are really not competent. So I would say that even with the international sanctions that we have now, a democratic country with rule of law, where competent people with expertise were in top positions, would have been, situation of people would have been much better. But when it comes to sanctions, of course, it is, I think, very important to direct sanctions against the authorities. For example, the Revolutionary Guards. This is a huge organization. They have lots of power. They are responsible for human rights violations. They are responsible for many of this, conflicts in the Middle East. They, as an organization, should be on the terrorist list. Canada did it partly a few days ago. This should have been done for a long time ago. So I think people in Iran would rather have more focused sanctions directed against the authorities and mechanisms to hold them accountable.
Thank you very much. You left your country and you were part of the brain drain that takes place in Iran. From what we have been able to gather, in the last 15 years, anywhere from 150,000 to 180,000 professionals, intellectuals, professors leave Iran. What is the result of that is obvious. You have a lot of talent all around. And you have changed your focus, not only from your professional life, but you have established a network throughout the world of these intellectuals that are supporting the efforts of human rights. How that change took place?
Yes, you see, I actually was, when we left Iran, I was a teenager at that time. So I have my educations from Norway. But as you say, now I work as a professor in neuroscience at the University of Oslo. Almost every day we receive letters from bright Iranian students who want to get out of Iran, who want to come and it's the same. There are many Iranians at MIT. I was at Harvard in 2006, 2007, and I met many Iranians who had left Iran because basically until a certain level they can continue, but after that, if they don't cooperate with the system, they are not, they don't have any possibility to grow, to develop. And this is a disaster, I think, for a country that their brightest people either are forced to leave the country, and we have some in the prisons. Right now, probably you saw there are protests in all Iranian universities. Sharif University, which is an elite university, it is under huge pressure. Many students have been arrested. The same with the professors. So we see this reality that the main problem is the system, the Islamic Republic, which is based on a tiny minority. Most people on top of the Iranian regime, many of them have familiar ties with each other, and they are controlling everything. And people, they don't have so many choices. Either they have to cooperate with the corrupt system. Two, they have to leave the country, which is, it's never easy to leave your home and your family, but many people do it because that's probably the easiest way. And the third is to stand up against them and try to make a change. So for me, outside the country, this third option is, of course, much easier because I'm not risking so much, because I live in a safe country. I'm not threatened to prison or death every day the way my colleagues and my friends inside Iran are. So I think that I believe in the fact that ordinary people like us, we have a power. We can bring about a change. And that's why I'm doing it. And I have seen that more and more people are thinking the same way. So the protests that we see now, I think people have come to the point that they see that actually they are not powerless. And the Islamic Republic is not as powerful as they pretend to be. It's a minority. It's right that they have all the arms and they control. They have an army, but we are like 80 million people, and they cannot continue forever this way.
Thank you. Tell us a little bit about the Iran Human Rights. It's one of the most visible human rights organizations specialized in Iran. What are you planning to do in the next few months, and how do you interact with all the other human rights organizations that focus on Iran?
Yes, so Iran Human Rights, it was established about 15 to 17 years ago by me and some human rights defenders inside Iran. And throughout all these years, we have managed to build up a network, a broad network inside the country. And this is the reason why we are able to report about what is going on, despite the limitations that they are on internet and the threats that the families of those who have been killed in the protests are subjected to. So when we established it, we thought that before, the politics in Iran was mainly based on whether you believed in this or that person or this or that political faction. But we saw that our main problem is actually fundamental human rights. So we are part of this human rights movement that has been established in the last 20 years. You see them on the streets, people who are on the streets protesting, they don't name a charismatic leader that they want to replace the current leaders with. But what they say is that they want freedom, they want women's rights, they want human rights. And I think this is the way to go, because last time in 1979, it was completely opposite. People were shouting that they want Ayatollah Khomeini without knowing what it stands for. And, he used this opportunity to come to power and basically made people's lives miserable. So we are part of this human rights movement that is growing, and in the coming months we try our best to be the voice of Iranian people inside the country, trying to echo them, trying to make the international community to support their demands, and trying to make UN to establish mechanisms to help Iranian people.
Thank you very much. In this last minute or so we have left, what is the one thing we must always have present when we hear about Iran, when we think about Iran, for us who live outside of your country?
I think it's very important to remember that what we see in Iran now will have impact way beyond Iran's borders, because we know that when the Islamic Republic was established, with that we had the wave of fundamentalism across the Middle East. And now when the Islamic Republic, when it's gone, I think it will be liberating for millions of, especially women, across the Middle East and maybe across the world. So I really hope that people around the world see what's going on in Iran as the human rights movement of our time. In the 60s, we remember a civil rights movement in the US. Now we have movement in Iran where women are standing up, and I think they need our support, and I hope as many people as possible can support them.
It was a pleasure, Dr. Mahmood Amiry-Moghaddam, and we hope to have you back in the program, and thank you for all your insights.
Thank you so much for having me here.